I am Megan Dyer, and I'm the 4-H agent here in Page County. And I am for the soil because it is the foundation for producing our plants and our food systems.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee, and joining me, my co-host, Dr. Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition is taking a couple of weeks off, and we welcome her back in just a couple of weeks to rejoin the podcast. But Dr. Bendfeldt, we have a different topic today, a very unique topic as it relates to soil health. Would you do the honors of introducing our special guest?
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have Nicolas Melas with us of Millsong Bakery. Nicolas, we're pleased to have you, and we've had some of your colleagues from the Common Grain Alliance, and just really trying to understand a little bit more where soil health fits in with baking and grain production and creating more of a healthy, vibrant regional food system. So very much like to hear your journey into baking and concern for the environment and healthy food. So welcome.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys for having me today. And hello to this community of listeners. Yeah, my journey in baking really started out with agriculture. I've been growing vegetables and fruits and different things. Yeah, we've been involved in even a small scale pasture management thing with the dairy here in Harrisonburg. That's another story. But the point is, we've been involved in small scale local agriculture, my wife and I, for 15 years here in Harrisonburg. And we worked with a nonprofit called New Community Project, also known as Vine and Fig, managing the vegetable gardens there, intensive perennial polyculture, and the veggie gardens there. But out of that, we just were naturally homesteading. We were trying to live off the land, put up as many of our own fruits and vegetables and like I mentioned, dairy before as we could, and try to maximize our time with one another and minimize our time spent working to buy food. So we thought, let's just work to make our food. And one of my chores each week was to bake a sourdough loaf of bread. We would have bought the loaf, but there wasn't anywhere that we could find to get a whole grain or an organic wheat, fresh milled sourdough loaf of bread. So we decided, all right, well, we'll just buy our grains in bulk. We were just getting them from Sharp Shopper. You can get organic bulk grains from Sharp Shopper here in Harrisonburg. And we got a tabletop mill, and we're making our own bread at our place. And then we found there was a master bread baker in a community in France that we were connected to through some friends, who was looking for an apprentice. He had been working by himself for some years and thought it'd be time to teach somebody else and have some help. And we talked seriously about that option and ended up being open to taking that. We went over there to live at a community in France. And in France, there's an interesting story. I don't want to go on too long about it, but it's interesting because you cannot sell a loaf of bread in France unless you have the equivalent of an associate's degree. You have to go to a state university and pass a certain test in order to be able to sell a loaf of bread in the country of France. It's similar to in Germany, there's like purity laws about beer, because the national identity is so tied to these things, they make rules about them. But there's one loophole in France, and it's that they value their bakers so much, but they also value their farmers and their farmland so much that if you are a farmer who makes his own flour and uses up to 51% or more of his own grain you can sell a loaf of bread in France as a farmer without having to go through the state school. So there's a large movement in France of what they call paysan boulanger. So farmer, miller, baker. And I went to go work with one of those farmer, miller, bakers, and it was fantastic. Sometimes my task was to go out and disc the field or whatever in preparation for planting. And sometimes my task were to watch the mill and definitely to mix and shape and bake the loaves.
That sounds fascinating, and you have such an interesting career. By the way, we are talking today with Nico Melas in Harrisonburg, Virginia, about his skills concerning baking and how that relates to soil health. Nico, here in the Shenandoah Valley, where this podcast originates from, as well as anywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia, how difficult is it to find the grains that you're looking for as an artisan baker? Are you looking for local grains? Tell us about that search for what you need as a baker.
Not necessarily difficult to find the grains, but to find the grains that have the baking quality that I need. It's not always easy. So it really depends on the growing season, on the year, and on the nutrition of the plant. On sprout damage, when the rainfall came. Just all these ancestral stories. We read the Little House on the Prairie type books to our kids and all these old farm books. And just to hear the anxiety sometimes around the wheat harvest and the weather, there's a reason for that, is that the qualities of the year are really embedded in the wheat itself. Like you can sort of, each grain will tell its story of how the growing conditions were. So this is a great climate for growing grains in general. The Shenandoah Valley especially is a great climate for growing grains. I was told that before the onset of national kind of modern agriculture and chemical agriculture, the three regions on the east that were net exporters of grain were the Shenandoah Valley, and then in Ohio, I want to say Holmgren County, but it's not. It's Holmes County. Yeah. So it was the Shenandoah Valley, Holmes County, and Lancaster County were the three net exporters of wheat. So we're in one of those here, thankfully. So we got a shot at growing our own wheat, and we've been doing it.
And Nico, if you could tell us like a typical day. I know you're involved with the Harrisonburg Farmers Market and sell there as well as to other households. If you could tell us about your typical day.
Yes. So typical day in our life is it's by the day of the week. So our week starts on Tuesday. Monday is a day to catch up and do any desk work, paperwork that needs to get done. And there's plenty of that. Tuesdays, we usually start by milling up a bunch of spelt. So we have one of our breads is 100% spelt, which is an ancestral wheat. It's either an ancestor of modern wheat or it's a cross between, I believe it's emmer and common wheat. It's a debate whether it's an ancestor of wheat or it's a cross between wheat and one of its other ancestors. But anyway, it's a heritage grain. So our week starts with grinding that up. We probably need 30 kilos of that, which is about 60 pounds. And then we'll probably, today we got to get our grains tempered. So when you harvest grains, they're somewhere in the 13 to 15% moisture range. To store them, you have to dry them down below 13. Because it's quite dry in the summers here, which is one of the reasons it's good for growing grain, the wheat ends up being like 11, 10, sometimes 9% humidity. And that's no problem for making whole grain flours. But for making sifted flour, which we make some of that too, we have to temper it back up to 13, 14 range. So that requires scaling out the wheat, scaling out filtered water, and mixing them together. And yes, so that's Tuesday. We make our flour, and then Wednesday we make more flour and toast our seeds. Sometimes we make granola on Wednesdays. So yeah, we toast the seeds that are going to go into our breads so that they're more flavorful and easier to slice through. And then Thursday is a big day where we feed our sourdough starter in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And the evening feed is for the next day's mix. And Friday we mix several doughs. So that's a basic idea of our week. If anybody wants to know more specific, I'm happy to share. I could get as detailed as someone wanted to.
Well, if people wanted to get a visual idea of what you do and how you do it, I might recommend a video that you were involved with. It's called Against the Grain, Beyond the Grind. I believe it was produced by Virginia Cooperative Extension and was produced within the last couple of years, so it is very recent. But listeners, if you want to see how Nico does what he does, you need to watch that video. And once again, the title is Against the Grain, Beyond the Grind. Nico, if you could talk about your involvement with that video.
Yeah, so my neighbor, Phyllis Ressler, was involved in a video, I believe, about cheese, about dairy and cheese. She's a food anthropologist and a lover of good foods and a big supporter of our bakery. And she said, "Oh, these folks at Cooperative Extension, have you heard of Eric Bendfeldt?" And I've known Eric for some years, just being involved in organic veggie production and the farm to table meeting. And yeah, so she connected Eric and I, said that they were interested in making a video about grain. And I was immediately interested. And then the filmmaker, Ernie Dito, reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we come visit you guys on a bake day and at a farmer's market and sit down and talk one day?" And so that's how that got connected. So Eric and Ernie were trying to make a video about local grains. And yeah, through word of mouth, heard of me. And I'm very thankful for that because that video is beautiful.
And once again, for our listeners, if you want to watch that video, it is on YouTube, Against the Grain, Beyond the Grind. And I would highly recommend that video. It's very well produced, and it's a very interesting story. Dr. Bendfeldt, I believe you had an additional question.
Yes, Nico. Just how have you, I know you have relationships and often conversations at the farmers market. You know, how do you develop the conversations with area farmers around grain production?
Yeah, so conversations with farmers have developed quite naturally. And I have reached out to a few farmers locally, starting with Philip Whitmer. I really just called him out of the blue. I had heard of him some years ago. It's a small town here in Harrisonburg, and I go to church with a cousin of Philip's. So I had heard that he had cropland and grew wheat. And so that's all I knew. And organic, that's all I knew. And so I thought, all right, I wrote his phone number down like 5 years ago. And I pulled it out when I came back from France and called him up and said, "Hey, I remember you, you're Sylvia's cousin, and I wonder if you have any wheat." He said, "Well, I've got a soft red." So that was the first connection. So we were using wheats from Pennsylvania when we started the bakery that we knew about from other bakeries that do a similar business model to ours. And we slowly, or not so slowly, if you ask some people, tried to stop buying wheat from Pennsylvania and start buying wheat from Rockingham County. So started with Philip. We got connected with Evan Showalter, and that was just a random thing. So Evan and Philip have been willing to experiment and try different grains. Also, I got connected with Gary Nicely. Now, that was a great connection because I found him through the internet. I did not expect to find a local farmer through the internet, but I was looking at Carolina Ground. So Carolina Ground is a group that makes flour from regional organic grains in North Carolina and Asheville. And on their website was their list of producers, and one of them was in Dayton, Virginia. And so I tried to track him down pretty quick.
Unfortunately, our time is up in this episode, Nico, but we'd like to invite you, if you've got the time, to stay with us, and we'll go ahead and record a second episode, a part 2, if you will, and we'll continue to talk about what you do, baking bread and other baked goods, and the artisan craft of how that works, and how it all ties into soil health. So if you do that, we'd certainly appreciate it. But thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for joining us in this episode.
Thank you, guys.
And Dr. Bendfeldt will catch you in the next one. For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you should have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program is provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.